What y'all listening to?
Limelight Highlight Podcast.
Welcome back to the show, your positive podcast, safe space, and great place for a positive outlook on life. This podcast is brought to you by the nonprofit organization The Block Gives Back, and man, oh man, do we have a busy month ahead of us. At the end of the month, The Block Gives Back will be doing their Block to School drive in front of the Block shop on August 22nd, where they'll be giving out 1,000 book bags filled with school supplies, along with other great services given out that day. So be sure to pull up and help out or just be a part of the fun. Check out theblockgivesback.org for more details. They're still giving out food and groceries every week, and this past week has not changed. So on top of the much anticipated Block to School drive, Tommy, who happens to be the president of the Block Gives Back, has been playing matchmaker with me and a few potential podcast guests. So my trip back to Philly later on this month will be jam-packed, and I have a growing list of guests confirmed for the episodes to be in the future. So be sure to keep an eye out for that one and all of the exciting stuff to come soon. Now, last couple episodes I've been with guests, and you haven't really gotten a good old-fashioned podcast episode where I report on good news. So ideally, I would love for every episode to be featuring and highlighting a guest who's doing something good or making a positive impact on their surroundings, but that's in due time. Everything grows at its own rate, so not to worry though. This week we'll be back to our regular scheduled program, and as with every episode, let's begin with this week's unrelated fun fact. This week's unrelated fun fact is about an old saying that we know all too well. I mean, you've said it, I've said it, and if not, you'd at least heard it. And the saying I'm talking about is shotgun. When you're younger, or even to this day, you and your friends, cousins, siblings are about to get in the car, and as a passenger, not the driver, of course. And the unwritten rule is for those who get to sit in the front is whoever calls out shotgun first. Or you're a savage and you didn't really respect the unwritten laws. By sitting up front, you just race there first and bully your way into the front seat. But all those people are probably criminals right now. So regardless, it's pretty interesting where this saying came from. The term shotgun, when riding in a car, comes from the term shotgun messenger. Now, back in the Old West, a shotgun messenger was a guard who sat in the front next to the stagecoach driver, basically the passenger seat. And the guard would use a shotgun to keep robbers and criminals away. And with Hollywood being obsessed with its old Western flicks back in the day, they kept this name alive, and it evolved and made its way into our society. So I just thought it was funny how something so simple has stayed relevant for so long, even to this day. But now whenever you yell out shotgun, you know why. And just wanted to share that funny little truth with you. Now let's get on with the show. Due to the coronavirus ravaging the food market, farmers are having to destroy their own crops. Many of the crops have not found its way to hungry Americans in time, and it could be due to a multiple amount of reasons, but some farmers are blaming the USDA. Farmers are pouring thousands and thousands of gallons of milk down the drain, crushing ripe fruit and vegetables, and a lot of it's being plowed back into the ground, known as remulching. And this is just a way to prevent more crops from rotting in the field and attracting pests like other animals and rodents and nasty insects. Our first story is actually coming out of Washington State. George Ahern heard that farmers were giving away onions and potatoes that they were unable to sell in Washington State. And with so many crops being destroyed or left to rot, the farmers preferred to see the crops go back to food banks in Seattle, which is really good. And being inspired by the farmers' kindness, George took to Facebook and asked to borrow somebody's truck or trailer just for the day so he can go around collecting some crops and haul over 2,000 pounds of restaurant-grade onions and potatoes, because you wouldn't believe how many people need onions and potatoes. And because this world isn't that terrible, despite what you see on TV and you hear on TV, his request was met with 4 trucks and 2 trailers, which then hauled 9.3 tons of crops grown in the East to feed hungry people in the West. This voluntary act of kindness grew into a nonprofit organization called East West Food Rescue. It has saved over 2.4 million pounds of food from fields while also collecting enough donations to help compensate farmers for their loss. This whole thing started because of COVID, and when the pandemic hit, these farmers immediately lost all the restaurant contracts that they had for quality potatoes and onions. So the first run that George put together, he had relied on several people from Washington who had trucks, and he also worked with another nonprofit organization who happened to donate crates and boxes that they then used to transport crops, because apparently food banks can't accept semi trucks, like a semi truck loaded of loose potatoes or onions or anything loose. They have to be in containers. So good thing he worked with another nonprofit. George did a lot of what's called trial and error when he started. He was kind of just figuring it out as he went. So the goal of his new nonprofit was to rescue 10 million pounds of food, which George is currently trying to raise $250,000 for. A huge concern, and the organization's number one priority, is to get refrigeration capacity for fruit and other produce, as well as for milk and eggs. So that's where all that money's going to go to. And after reaching their first, the organization that he put together, after reaching their first 70 tons of food, the plan was to shut down so he could spend more time with his family. But as time went by, he just kind of accepted the fact that as of right now, he just can't stop. There's too many people that are relying on him and everything that he's doing, that he's just got to keep going. The longer we're remaining in this lockdown, the more I'm realizing that people are sick and tired of waiting for the government to take action and take care of the citizens of this nation, because I mean, I don't have all the answers. I don't claim to have all the answers to the problems that we have, but doing more and more of these stories just shows how, as a nation collectively, we need to rely more on each other and help each other with other things, especially through these difficult times. I hear a lot of, why isn't the government doing this, or why hasn't there been any implementation of law or bills or anything like that? And people are getting tired of waiting around. We got to stop relying on the government so much as we give them the damn taxes and stuff. You know, we're led to believe for so long that we need to be consistent or just in constant competition with each other, as if, you know, there's a limited amount of resources available to us. But you can see that there's an abundance, and we can all have a piece of that abundance. Government takes our tax dollars. They do everything but what we actually want, which is security. I mean, if anything shows that, it's this pandemic. This past week, Tommy from the Block Is Back shared a post on Facebook from Bloomberg.com, which was titled, "Almost 30 million in U.S. didn't have enough to eat last week." I mean, prior episodes, we covered how serious a problem food insecurity is, especially in the country where abundance has been a staple to something that we pride ourselves on. So it's people like George Ahern and organizations like the Block Is Back that should and absolutely need to be highlighted. It's no secret that we can't count on our government to take care of us. So we need to come together and spread the word about amazing people and organizations that are truly taking matters into their own hands and helping the citizens of this country. George and his organization has rescued 2.4 million pounds of farmers' crops that would have otherwise gone to waste, and got that food to food banks across the entire state of Washington. So another little fact is the Block Gives Back has served over 2,000 meals to go meals, along with countless amounts of groceries and other goods to families in Philadelphia. So these are the people that really need our attention and our help, so we can get a chain reaction to go out and help others. Remember, it only takes one person to set off a chain reaction to start making a difference, and it's up to us to come together and make sure it stays consistent and continues to drive, because in the end, we're only helping ourselves by helping each other. And since we're on the topic of helping each other out along with food insecurity, let's make a trip over to our neighbors in the Big Apple, specifically a borough that doesn't have the reputation for being the nicest. Me being Puerto Rican and from Philly, there's likely a high chance that, well, actually, if you're Puerto Rican, and you're from Philly, there's a highly likely chance that you have ties or family in New York, or at least know somebody. I mean, that's the case for me anyway. I have tons of cousins, both first and second cousins, as well as extended aunts and uncles from extended families that, all that. So growing up, we'd go to New York almost every single weekend. My mom she was born in New York, so we had a lot of family there. And for people who aren't familiar with the geography of the tri-state area, the tri-state area is Philly, Jersey, New York. New York is about 2 hours, give or take, from Philadelphia, so don't take much to get there. And so anyway, we would go there and visit family all the time. And whether if it was for a family event or holiday or maybe just to hang out, we'd always go there. So specifically, most of my extended family lived in Harlem, but my mom and I would always stay with our cousin who happened to live in the Bronx. Now, if you know anything about New York, you know the only reason you'd go to the Bronx is if you have family there or some type of business being there. You don't just visit there because it's the Bronx. You know, it's not really the safest place, or they don't have a reputation for just welcoming anybody. It's not something most people do. So this story is actually about that specific borough, and it's titled "From Pizza to Fresh Vegetables." When you're in the Bronx, you're gonna get fed and by this generous community. Naturally, the title caught my attention, and what I read kind of left me pleasantly surprised. So apparently in the Bronx, they are now one of the 50 finalists in Reader's Digest's 50 Nicest Places in America contest for 2020. Granted, I haven't been to New York since I was pretty young, so with everything in time, things change. The Bronx is home to 1.4 million people and is considered one of the most racially diverse places in the country. The area in the Bronx we're talking about specifically is Riverdale, which for some, they don't really consider it to be a part of the Bronx, but geographically speaking, it is. So details, I guess. As far as food goes, Chicago has their deep dish pizza. Philadelphia is famous for their cheesesteaks, and rightfully so, because they're delicious. And of course, New York is famous for their pizza. And if there is one nationwide thing that brings people together, I would have to say it's pizza. In early March, Eliza Abrams Koenig pre-ordered 30 pizzas for a party to celebrate the Jewish holiday Purim at her synagogue. Then, of course, during March, COVID hit, and as with everyone's plans, they had to change. So the party was canceled, but Eliza picked up 30 pizzas from Cappuccino Bakery anyway, and with her and 7 other volunteers, they delivered them to quarantine members of her synagogue. Now, just like our last story, another organization was born due to this virus, and this organization has been named the Pizza Brigade. Volunteers kept up the pizza deliveries at no charge to the families 1 week until their quarantine was over. In total, they fed more than 100 families, and not just pizza, mind you. The Pizza Brigade partnered with a bakery owner and started weekly deliveries to challah, which is of challah. I guess that's the bread that Jews usually eat every week on the Sabbath, but I don't really know much about the Jewish community, but that's what the article said. And the Pizza Brigade started to expand their operations, and in a single day, they delivered 20 pizzas to healthcare professionals battling COVID in the emergency room and Montefiore Medical Center. Then they delivered 25 pizzas to Hatzalah, which is a local volunteer ambulance corps. And the next day, they delivered 10 pizzas to Weill Cornell Hospital. Every order that came in helped keep the restaurant in business and the bakery staff employed. So like many other great ideas, this one also took off, and other Jewish communities started sending pizzas to those around them who needed some support. It even crossed state lines to Connecticut, where 40 pizzas were sent to families on the front lines. So pretty big outreach. In a different part of Riverdale, Selma Raven and her partner Sarah Allen noticed that their neighbors needed help. And it just happened to fall on the 7th anniversary of the day Selma lost her son Michael, who had been an activist fighting against healthy food deserts. And food deserts are communities, particularly low-income areas, which residents don't live in close proximity to affordable and healthy food retailers. And healthy food options in these communities are harder, getting more and harder to find more affordable good food. So Just wanted to add a bit of that information there because I didn't really know what a food desert was. I've heard